Hello, good morning, how you doing? Waking up, shaking yesterday's blues, yeah. Turn the TV off, it's bad news, man. Feeling fresh like a Ziploc new man. OJ with a champagne tuna. My muscle Holy Ghost running through ya. Hell yeah, it's a new hallelujah. Popping like the top off a bottle and I ain't stopping, yeah. Baby, it's a brand new day. Ain't no clouds hanging over me. Something doesn't feel the same. The rest of my life gonna start today. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. The rest of my life gonna start today. Calling up the ocean, this is evolution. Can I grow into another animal, the next level? I'm sprouting wings and I just wanna sing. In the future now, the past can't hold me. Forget about yesterday, Paul McCartney. I'm feeling like a Beatle on stage, and the whole wide world's gonna know my name. Baby, it's a brand new day. Ain't no clouds hanging over me. Something doesn't feel the same. The rest of my life gonna start today. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. The rest of my life gonna start today.
This is the Mary, or Orange M, or M train, whichever one you guys feel like fucking going with. Now the M starts off at Metropolitan Avenue in Queens on the Myrtle Avenue line and heads on over to Myrtle Avenue Station in Brooklyn, meeting up with the J and Z trains on the BMT Jamaica line. The three of them head over to Williamsburg Bridge to Essex Street, where the M splits off from the J and Z and heads down the Christie Street cut to Broadway Lafayette, meeting up with the B, D, and F trains. Now of course, this is 6th Avenue, so the B and D are on the Express and the F and M are on the local. Once the four of them get to 47 50th Street, Rockefeller Center, the M splits off from the B, D, and F and meets up with the A at 5th Avenue, 53rd Street. Once there, the two of them head through the 53rd Street tube to Queens Plaza, meeting up with the R. At this point, the M switches off from the same track as the E and goes on to the same track as the R, going local via Queens Boulevard to 71st Continental Avenue. Yes, in Queens, and yes, that is the last stop. Now the equipment for the M is of course them bland-ass R160s, on a rare occasion an R179, and on a super rare occasion an R143, which to be honest, I wish that's what the M would use sometimes because yo, going up and down 6th Avenue and Queens Boulevard line with an R143 does not sound half bad. This is what I keep telling you guys at the MTA. Spice it up a little. And to be honest, listen, tech trains are bland as shit. The only thing that actually is redeeming quality to them is the fucking sounds that they make. So hearing a different sound on an M would not be a bad thing. Just saying. Fucking unseasoned ass colonizer trains and shit. Okay, with the exception of the 143s and the Siemens 160s. But other than that, bland ass colonizer shit. Weekend daytime and late evening weekday service only runs from Metropolitan Avenue to Essex Street. And late night service only goes to Myrtle Avenue from Metropolitan Avenue. Now the M service on Queens Boulevard is pretty standard. Literally, right after an R, you're gonna find an M right behind it, which translates over to 6th Avenue, where 6th Avenue is the same exact thing. Right after an F, or two Fs, mind you, is an M. Just like how the V was back in the day. And then we get to the Eastern Division, where it partly becomes a pain in the ass. But not for too long, which is great, because once it gets to Central Avenue and beyond, going to Metropolitan, you got a train showing up almost every 8 to 12 minutes, so it's fine. It's just at night where the issue lies the most for the M. Like I said in the Brown M review, it's the same exact thing like before. Late nights on the Mary, especially as a shuttle, is the absolute pits. Why? Because you only got 1 to 2 trains running on the fucking line. Then they take forever in a day to show up. Listen, the M as a shuttle is ass cheeks. The M as a full service is lit as fuck. But that's because, of course, it developed V train traits. And we all knew that the V was hot. Now how the Orange M came to be, of course, well, I've already explained that. But for those of you just joining in, don't worry, I have a history trip lined up for you. And boy, was it a bitch trying to put this shit together. Because the M's history is in fragments. And the problem is you have to go and find the fragments. Like I'm out here looking for the Master Emerald and shit. I already did that. You see it in Sonic Frontiers. And for anybody that lives in or around the BMT Triangle of trains, good fucking luck. Because those trains, oh my God, at night, oh, no. Not today, my friend. The M being one of those trains. You know, it's crazy. You go from so many years of riding the M as a kid to what it used to be, and then now, as an adult, riding the M now, It's a bit weird, but you know, if it works, it works. And according to the passengers, it works. Everybody likes having the idea of having a one-seat ride into the city and back, which of course I don't blame them. And on top of that, you're going up 6th Avenue too. So you're getting one hell of a benefit. And on top of that, it's an Eastern Division train going into the main line. So to be honest, we ain't got no choice but to put some respect on the Mary's name. Now, of course, anybody can literally sit here and do a review on the M. Why? Because the M is one of those modern day trains using the most modern day equipment. Hence the reason why in this video, the real meat and potatoes lies in the history trip. So now here I am to answer the age-old question of what the fuck is that on top of Myrtle Avenue on the J, M, and Z? Literally, that's how the question's always asked. In the late 1800s, Brooklyn Elevated Railroad, which later became BRT, had a line going from Myrtle Avenue and Broadway to where we currently see the J, M, and Z today, all the way down Myrtle Avenue to Sand Street in downtown Brooklyn. On September 24th, 1883, a Brooklyn Bridge Cable Power Railway opened between Park Row in Manhattan and Sand Street in Brooklyn. Which, funny enough, that was actually the O train. Go ahead, look it up, I dare you. Now what happened was around this time, there was an extension to the Myrtle Avenue line going into Park Row, using the O's tracks to get there, which unfortunately got the boot
motherfucking boot
in the process. Now, of course, this is during the BRT era, which means that the route in itself was actually a number. And in 1924, it was the 11th. Now, when the Myrtle Avenue Viaduct opened on July 29th, 1914, there was a train that went through there, of course, and it's the train that we know today, which is the M. But back in the day, in BRT era, it was known as the 10, which ran to Chamber Street on the Nassau Street Loop in Lower Manhattan. Following the completion of a third track along Broadway Elevated, which is basically BMT Jamaica line today, between Marcy Avenue and Myrtle Avenue on January 17, 1916, these trains began running express on the Broadway Elevated during evening rush hour in peak direction. By 1920, trains began running express in the morning rush hour and on Saturday afternoon in peak direction. The number 10 was assigned to the service in 1924. At the time, service ran on weekdays between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m., on Saturdays from 6 a.m. and 9 p.m., and on Sundays from 12:30 to 11 p.m. In the morning, rush hour trains ran express between Central Avenue and Essex Street, and during the evening rush hour, trains ran express between Bowery and Myrtle Avenue. Sunday service was removed in June 1933. All Saturday trains began running local on June 28, 1952. On June 28, 1958, Saturday service was discontinued. On May 26, 1959, midday service was eliminated, making the 10 train rush hours only. Service had previously operated on weekdays from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Beginning on February 23rd, 1960, express trains began stopping at Marcy Avenue, which was originally a local stop. Now on March 5th, 1994, 11 trains stopped running over the Brooklyn Bridge, instead ending at J Street on the Brooklyn side, with free transfers to I&D trains at J Street Borough Hall. In 1967, when the Christie Street cut opened, the 11th service was named the MJ. In 1961, with the arrival of new subway cars, which featured roll signs with new letter designations for BMT numbered services, the 10 was renamed the M, and the 11 was renamed the MJ. Since these cars were not assigned to the route, it remained as the 10. However, the Nassau Street specials on the BMT Brighton line and 4th Avenue line used the turquoise M bullet. The line was officially known as the M after the Christie Street changeover on November 27, 1967. The MJ, on the other hand, died on October 1969, which was replaced by a free bus transfer to the B54 on some BX55 type shit. Several days before the scheduled closing date, some supports of the elevated structure was hit by a truck, temporarily suspended service. Timber reinforcement was applied to the damaged beams, allowing service to resume operation until the scheduled closing date. The second half of the Christie Street connection opened on July 1st, 1968, and the JJ, which ran along Nassau Street to Broad Street, was relocated through the new connection to the I&D 6th Avenue line and named the KK. To augment QJ service to Broad Street, the M was extended 2 stations from Chamber Street to Broad Street. On October 4th, 1969, the Myrtle Avenue Elevated was discontinued south of Myrtle Avenue to J Street. To make up for the loss of the MJ service, the M was expanded to run during middays, operating weekdays between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. And a new shuttle began running between Myrtle Avenue and Metropolitan Avenue at other times. In August 1972, the off-hour shuttle was renamed as part of the M. On January 2nd, 1973, the daytime QJ ended at Broad Street as the J and M was extended beyond Broad Street during the day along the QJ's former route to Coney Island via the Montague Street Tube and the Brighton Line local tracks. In addition, its weekday span of service was increased by an hour from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. The K, renamed from the KK in 1973, was eliminated on August 27, 1976. and M Express service between Myrtle and Marcy Avenue had ended. On January 2nd, 1978, changes were made to the D and M service on Brighton Line. Northbound weekday M train service originating at Kings Highway would begin at 5:46 a.m., while northbound service from Coney Island would begin at 6:34 a.m. From 5:40 to 6:34 a.m., northbound D trains would run local from Brighton Beach to Kings Highway and then run express to Prospect Park. Late morning and early afternoon D trains would from then on run express from Brighton Beach to Kings Highway. The span of D express service to Brighton Beach was extended by 45 minutes to 9:05 p.m. from Prospect Park, and the span of M service from Broad Street to Coney Island was extended by 45 minutes to cover local stops. A 6-month reconstruction project on the Brighton Line began on April 26, 1986, and to reduce congestion and delays, weekday daytime M service was shifted to the 4th Avenue Line's express track south of DeKalb Avenue and the BMT West End Line. Service began terminating at 9th Avenue during midday and at Bay Parkway during rush hours. This service duplicated a pattern that had last been operated as the TT until late 1967. Manhattan-bound M trains operated from Bay Parkway between about 7 o'clock and 8:20 a.m., operating every 12 to 15 minutes. Bay Parkway-bound M trains left Chambers Street between 4:20 and 5:30 p.m. In 1991, M trains began running with fewer cars at all times except weekdays from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. in order to increase passenger security during overnight hours. M service along 4th Avenue operating between 6:30 a.m. and 8 p.m. was switched to the local tracks on May 31st, 1994, switching with the People's Train, which had run local since the M was moved in 1987. The change was implemented on a 6-month trial and made permanent afterwards. The change was part of New York City Transit's Fair Deal, which sought to increase transit ridership by improving service. The change was proposed in November 1993, and public hearings on the change was held. The change reduced travel times by 4.5 minutes for 26,000 people, a majority of riders on the corridor. As a result of the change, some riders shifted from using stations on the BMT West End line to the BMT Sea Beach line, and from 4th Avenue local stops to 4th Avenue express stops. Market research found that 44% of M riders felt that crowding decreased, and that 35% of M and 30% of the People's Train's riders used their service more frequently, and that 58% of riders thought that the change was a good idea, and that only riders at the 45th and 53rd Street stations, which received less frequent service, viewed the changes negatively. This change increased operating costs by $245,000. The midday M between 9:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. was temporarily terminated at Chambers Street on April 30th, 1995, from 9th Avenue in Brooklyn due to the closure of the Manhattan Bridge during weekday middays for structural repairs. The change was made to provide capacity in the Montague Street tunnel for the Q, which was rerouted from the Manhattan Bridge. To replace M local service in Brooklyn, during the midday, the People's Train began making local stops in Brooklyn. In addition, the span of M service to Brooklyn was reduced by 15 minutes in the early morning and in the late evening by 25 minutes. The elimination of midday service to Brooklyn was made permanent on November 12, 1995, after the 6-month repair project was completed, as part of a series of service cuts made by New York City Transit to make up a shortfall in its budget. The elimination of midday M service to Brooklyn was part of a larger plan to reduce spending in order to avert fare increase, which Governor George Pataki and Mayor Rudy Giuliani had pressured the MTA to avoid. Only 4,200 riders used M service to Brooklyn during middays, with fewer than 20 passengers per car, or 80 passengers per train. The M used 4-car trains during middays. Because of the low cost effectiveness of operating service to Brooklyn, and because of the existence of alternate service on the People's Train and the R, it was decided to cut the service. This cut service saved $664,000 annually. 3 alternative operating plans were considered: maintaining existing midday service, terminating midday service at Broad Street, and operating service as a shuttle-like weekend and late-night service. It was decided not to terminate service at Broad Street because it negated a large portion of crew savings due to the need for personnel to relay trains at Broad Street Terminal, longer running times, and because it had the potential to delay J service, which already terminated there. The shuttle option was dismissed because it would inconvenience a far larger number of M riders. From May 1st to September 1st, 1999, the Williamsburg Bridge subway tracks were closed for reconstruction, splitting the M train service in 2 sections. One ran at all times between Middle Village, Metropolitan Avenue, and Marcy Avenue, and the other ran between Bay Parkway and Chambers Street. A shuttle provided service on the BMT Nassau line. Fares on the B39 crossing the Williamsburg Bridge was eliminated, and free subway bus transfers services was given at Marcy Avenue and Delancey Street. The closure was anticipated to last until October 1999, but subway service was restored 1 month ahead of schedule. The project cost $130 million, including replacing the tracks, support structure, signal systems, and other equipment. From July 23, 2001 to February 22, 2004, work on the Manhattan Bridge subway tracks resulted in a midday extension back to 9th Avenue, as well as an extension of the times that the rush hour service was provided to 10 p.m. This change preserved service between West End Line and Chinatown for passengers who would have taken the B to Grand Street. When full Manhattan Bridge service was restored, midday M service was cut back to Chambers Street. Neighborhood leaders in Chinatown were angered by this decision to terminate midday at 9th Avenue instead of running it the Bay Parkway on the West End. A spokesman for New York City Transit stated that it was easier to terminate trains at 9th Avenue and that a signal upgrade project was going on further down the line. In addition, the temporary midday service to Brooklyn was lightly used, with an average of 50 to 60 riders per train during middays going to Brooklyn and fewer than 50 riders per train during evenings going to Brooklyn. On September 11, 2001, the World Trade attack caused a temporary reduction of the M to a full-time shuttle until September 17th. Then it was extended full-time over the BMT Sea Beach line to Stillwell Avenue, replacing the People's Train until October 28th. During this time, the People's Train was retired, and every other train had to literally take over its route, the M being one of them. Not only that, but the M was also using the People's equipment too. Yes, the gods themselves, the R32s. That is the time where I caught one. In December 2007, the MTA announced that it planned to set aside $27 million in 2008 and $60 million annually afterwards for service enhancements to help riders deal with the increased fares. Extended weekday evening M service to Broad Street and weekend service to Chambers Street were part of the plan. However, on March 24, 2008, it was announced that because the agency received substantially less revenue from taxes on real estate transactions, the enhancements were reduced to $4.5 million in 2008 and $8.9 million annually afterwards. The plan to extend weekend service to Chambers Street was dropped. After several months' delay, weekday evening trains were extended to Broad Street on July 27, 2008. On November 20, 2008, in light of severe budget woes, the MTA announced a slew of potential service cuts. Among them was the potential elimination of rush hour M service, which had extended beyond Chambers Street on the Nassau line in Lower Manhattan to Bay Parkway on the West End line in Brooklyn. In May 2009, after New York State legislature passed legislation to offer financial support to the MTA, the service cut was taken off the table. However, in late 2009, the MTA once again discovered that it was confronting another financial crisis. Most of the same service cuts threatened just months earlier were revisited. One proposal included completely phasing out M service and using the V as its replacement, thus the M and V combo. This plan, of course, was made by the rail fans originally. And the MTA saw that and was like, you know what? Hell, that's a good idea. Under this proposal, the V would no longer serve its South Terminal, which was 2nd Avenue. Instead, after leaving Broadway and Lafayette, it would run via the Christie Street cut and over the Williamsburg Bridge, unused since the elimination of the K in 1976, and stop at the upper BMT level of Essex Street in Manhattan before serving all the M stations to Metropolitan Avenue in Queens. The MTA determined that this move, while still a service cut, would actually benefit M riders, which surprisingly it actually did. Approximately 17,000 weekday riders used that route to reach the stations in Lower Manhattan, whereas 22,000 transferred to other routes to reach destinations in Midtown Manhattan. However, only about 10,000 riders in South Brooklyn used the M to access the Nassau Street line. This merger opened up new travel options for Northern Brooklyn and Queens, and it also allowed more convenient access to Midtown Manhattan via 6th Avenue. Oh, and by the way, when the M and V combo was announced, this is exactly what I was doing. I just wanted to do this because it's been so long. On March 19, 2010, it was reported that the plan had been changed and that while the new combined route would still be used, it would basically be known as the M. but the orange M. And the reason why it was orange is because of the fact that, of course, color code for 6th Avenue is orange. But of course, us rail fans like to think that the V actually gave its color over to the M. And trust and believe, it is hard to look at an M train and not think of the V train. But like I said, it is what it is. And believe me, I'm actually fine with this change, because I know in my mind, once the holiday train comes out, like I said, if it comes out of 2nd Avenue, it's a V train, period. Unless proven otherwise, that shit is a V. Of course, there was that age-old argument of which one should stay or go, between the M or the V. Of course, you had your fans that loved the M, and of course, you had your fans that loved the V. But ultimately, it was up to the MTA. And many MTA board members was against that whole elimination of the M. The reason that is because of the fact that they figured that riders would be more comfortable with seeing the M than the V, because of course, everybody knew what the M was, because the M had been around for a longer time than the V. People were just trying to get used to the V as it was. But us rail fans, the one who actually stuck to the V, know what the V was all about. And thus, the Orange M was officially born on June 28th, 2010. Now, on June 8th, 2014, weekend daytime M service was extended to Essex Street as part of an $18 million funding project to improve subway service, as well as offer a direct connection to the F on Saturdays and Sundays. Late night service continues to terminate at Myrtle Avenue. During the morning rush hour, the M is at 90% of New York City subways capacity guidelines. Ridership on the M has been growing very rapidly since the 2010 service change, and that's thanks to gentrification. And this trend is expected to continue. In June 2016, the frequencies of service on the M route during peak hours were increased, with the expectation that peak train frequencies would be raised again in the future. Of course, from July 1st, 2017 to April 30th, 2018, we all remember when the M was running to Broadway Junction, and that was due to the fact that they was trying to do repairs on the BMT Jamaica-Myrtle Junction and the Fresh Pond Bridge. When the Fresh Pond Bridge project was completed on September 2nd, 2017, 2 6-car shuttle trains began operating between Metropolitan and Wyckoff Avenues, which they were 42s, and good lord, they were fantastic. Believe me, we was all waiting to see if it was a 32 gonna show up. You already know, that's the main event, that's the god. So to see that shit on the M again after all these years, of course we're gonna be sitting up there trying to run after it. See how everybody moves when those trains are around? You better recognize greatness. 2 additional sets of 42s are also stored at Fresh Pond Yard. This way they could swap them in and out of service. This ran all the way up until April 27, 2018. When the Bedford Tube shutdown started in April 2019, weekend and weekday evening M service from 11 p.m. to 1:15 a.m. was extended from Essex Street to 96th Street on the 2nd Avenue subway in Manhattan via 63rd Street to compensate for the limited L service between Brooklyn and Manhattan. The M had to run to 96th Street because of capacity reductions on the Queens Boulevard line due to ongoing weekend construction. And boy, when there's weekend construction on the Queens Boulevard line, there's no way in hell I'm taking a Q60. Fuck all that. Both weekday and weekend M frequencies were also increased. This extra service was discontinued after completion of tunnel construction on April 27, 2020. Weekday evening service after 9:15 was also indefinitely cut back from Forest Hills to Essex Street to accommodate maintenance work for the installation of CBTC on Queens Boulevard line, 8th Avenue line, and 6th Avenue line. To be honest, the reroutes that the M actually does is pretty cool. I mean, listen, when it comes to providing service anywhere in any given point in time, the M is usually there. The M is usually the first train that I usually think of when it comes to stuff like that, especially going to 96th Street. When it was doing that, it was pretty cool. Not only did you get service in the middle of Manhattan, but you also got service on the east side of Manhattan as well. And we all know that the east side of Manhattan desperately needs service no matter what, because, you know, of course, nobody trying to deal with Lexington. And of course, the theme song for the M is Plant Kingdom from the Sonic Rush Adventure. Going through the history of the fucking Mary is a mouthful. I can understand the reason why the MTA wanted to keep the M in the first place over the V. I get it. The history. It's the history of the line and how long it's actually been in New York City. And I can understand that. Plus, not only that, but then also the people of New York City have known the M for a longer time than the V anyway. So of course, they would appeal to the M. Believe me, us rail fans, we definitely got memories of the V train. Fuck all that shit. Yo, the V was hot. Like I said in the V review, you already know, I was a huge fan of the V, but it is what it is. We just gotta accept it for what it is and roll with the punches. Now again, I wish in equipment wise, I wish they would throw a 143 on there, at least a one, like a random 143 that's just sitting in the yard one day. Just throw it on there at least. Something. But the M is one of those trains where it's like, look, if you gotta get somewhere, then you know what? If you're on 6th Avenue, if you see it, take it. It's just one of those trains. If you're in Brooklyn and you're trying to get to Manhattan, well, during the afternoons or the, during the day, you're in luck somewhat. You have an M to take you across the bridge into Manhattan, into 6th Avenue. So sure, the one-seat ride thing, I could definitely understand exactly where people are coming from, which, listen, I respect it. You have a train route that actually makes sense of where it goes into. It goes from literally the middle of nowhere into the middle of somewhere, back into the middle of almost nowhere. So, but the funny thing is, yes, of course, I know you can easily take the Q38 going from end to end on the M, which, I understand, it is what it is. At least we have a route that does some type of circle line like London. So yeah, as far as the M's concerned, listen, it's not a bad route at the end of the day. It does the job. It's got to do what it has to do, and it does it. So with that being said, I'll give the M an 8.5 out of 10. Just like the V before it, the M is doing its damn thing on 6th Avenue. There be times where the F doesn't even show up, and you got an M that shows up before that. Which, don't worry, I'll get to the F soon enough. Because I know last time I did the R32 F review, but to do an F review in general, now that's going to be a different story. But for right now, listen, the M gets an 8.5 out of 10, and it's a mainstay here in New York City Transit. It's served the city for generations, so I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. With that said, this is Knuckles of the Super Subway Brothers. You guys have a great night and stand clear of the goddamn closing doors.
It's a brand new day. Ain't no clouds hanging over me. Something doesn't feel the same. The rest of my life gonna start today. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. The rest of my life gonna start today. Calling up the ocean, this is evolution. Can I grow into another animal, the next level? I'm sprouting wings and I just wanna sing. In the future now, the past can't hold me. Forget about yesterday, Paul McCartney. I'm feeling like a Beatle on stage, and the whole wide world's gonna know my name. It's a brand new day. Ain't no clouds hanging over me. Something doesn't feel the same. The rest of my life gonna start today. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. The rest of my life gonna start today. Ladies and gentlemen, this part right here is very simple. It goes like this. I've been up, I've been down, but I got the feeling right now. I've been up, I've been down, but I got the feeling right now. I've been up, I've been down, till you got the feeling right now. It's a brand new day. Ain't no clouds hanging over me. Something doesn't feel the same. The rest of my life gonna start today. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. The rest of my life gonna start today. The rest of my life gonna start today.